Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to my channel. Well, I have something really interesting to share with you. Please stick around toward the end, until the end, because it really all comes together. So I'm going to start off by sharing what I asked my friends on Facebook to help me with. Okay, so I'll show you the post. Need some help. Does anyone know if there is any biblical or symbolic meaning of an artichoke? And one person who actually is not somebody that I met through the Bible prophecy community, it's somebody through a work type experience that I met, said Psalm 83:13. And so I looked up Psalm 83:13 and I didn't see anything about an artichoke. I mean, right here, oh my God, make them like the whirling dust, like the chaff before the wind. And I looked it up in my Bible and I looked at the heading of what Psalm 83, the heading of Psalm 83, and it says a prayer to frustrate conspiracy against Israel. So I figured, okay, I need to read all of Psalm 83 and I'm going to look at the commentary. So, and I'm also going to explain why this is all significant. So first, I'm going to read this and then I'm going to explain what happened between, me and my husband last night and this morning. Okay, so it's all going to come together and make sense. All right, now also while you're listening to this, think about what has been on your heart lately, because I do believe that this is a message for all of us today. I do believe that I would say it's a thus saith the Lord kind of situation. I think it's that serious, but in a good way. All right. Prayer to frustrate conspiracy against Israel. A psalm of Asaph. Do not keep silent, O God. Do not hold your peace, and do not be still, O God. For behold, your enemies make a tumult, and those who hate you have lifted up their head. They have taken crafty counsel against your people and consulted together against your sheltered ones. All right, this is a key part right here. They have taken crafty counsel, it's like a conspiracy, and consulted together against your sheltered ones. They have said, come and let us cut them off from being a nation, that the name of Israel may be remembered no more. For they have consulted together with one consent. They form a confederacy against you, the tents of Edom and the Ishmaelites, Moab and the Hagrites, Gebal, Ammon, Amalek, Philistia with the inhabitants of Tyre. Assyria also has joined with them. They have helped the children of Lot. Selah. Deal with them as with Midian, as with Sisera, as with Jabin in the brook, at the brook Kishon, who perished at Endor, who became as refuse on the earth. Make their nobles like Oreb and like Zeb, yes, all their princes like Zebah and Zalmunna. Who said, let us take for ourselves the pastures of God for a possession. Oh my God, make them like the whirling dust, like the chaff before the wind. As the fire burns and as the flame sets the mountain on fire, so pursue them with your tempest and frighten them with your storm. Fill their faces with shame, that they may seek your name, O Lord. Let them be confounded and dismayed forever. Yes, let them be put to shame and perish. Here's the kicker. That they may know that you, whose name alone is the Lord, are the most high over all the earth. So, again, I did not see an artichoke there. However, when you look at the commentaries of Psalm 83, this is extremely significant. So first of all, I'm going to show you, I did like a quick search of the symbolism of an artichoke, okay, because My husband and I were praying this morning. Why? Because he had a dream last night, and I have been feeling a sense of not knowing which way the Lord would have me go in a certain issue. Okay. And I do feel like there is a conspiracy, a global type of conspiracy to do harm, to possibly do harm to a mass amount of people. And I'm very concerned about it because some very well respected, highly cited, and, doctors who know what they're doing are saying this. So I've been praying about it a lot. So, all right. So my husband and I are praying about this dream that he had, and I'm going to explain that now. In the dream, he saw it was dark all around, as if perhaps he was in the woods but not sure about that. But he saw a campfire and there were some people. It seemed like it was a safe kind of a place. There was a campfire there and people gathered around it. Then he was, in another scene, he was inside of some type of a building. He could see out a very large window and see a big mushroom cloud go up. And from that point, he explained that he doesn't know exactly how it came to this, but he had the sense that he was moving, but he wasn't putting forth any effort to move. Kind of like if he explained, if you were to be put on a stretcher and be moved from one place to another, you would see movement happening around you, but you're not the one making the effort to move. And he was hiding, being sheltered underneath a seat, and he knew that the temperature was rising really fast. It's like he was in a car or something. And he was hiding under a seat of a car and looking underneath it, like hiding his face, knowing that he needed to put as many layers between him and this blast of some kind. He didn't hear the blast, but he saw. And he did not feel any heat, but the heat outside of this vehicle of whatever kind was rising really quickly. And he woke up after that. So, we've been talking this morning about some personal concerns of ours. And then I said, we need to pray. And I specifically said, I want you to pray. And I was listening to him pray. And oftentimes, many more times than not, the Lord shows me things while my husband prays. And this time, he said, this is funny. He said, Lord, show us, your plan. And in my spirit, I kind of like heard, I am and I will. Like, kind of like a duh. I am and I will. People need to listen. And then I started to see a really quick, it wasn't very long, I saw a flash of like a mushroom cloud. And at that point, I didn't really think much of it. I thought maybe I was just still remembering what he had explained to me in the dream. But then when I saw the next thing, that's when I knew that the Lord was showing me something. Well, this is what I saw, this artichoke. I saw something very similar to this, but not in like a artist rendering. It was an actual artichoke that had been cut from the stem, and it was more tight than this. Let me see. Kind of like this tightness, but not on the stem anymore. It was like floating. And then I saw it bloom, and I saw a purple bloom like what you see here. Except the bloom seemed to be more brilliant than this. Almost like, I don't know, the bloom was really big and perfect. More perfect than this. Well, I just thought, okay, I don't know what this means, but I think it means something. And so I asked the question on Facebook at that point. And so now you know more of the context of how all this started. So now I'm digging in, since I have a lead on Psalm 83. And I think it's really interesting, given what's going on in the world right now, that the Lord shows me this like a seemingly unrelated thing, an artichoke in the middle of a prayer for guidance from the Lord and a prayer for help. And this says a prayer for help when war threatens right here. I mean, if you look on the screen here, this is where we're at. I mean, this is what my husband saw, some kind of nuclear event. This psalm, I'm going to read some of these commentaries and some quotes that are really interesting. And I think that even though this stuff seems really doom and gloom, there's a lot of hope mixed in here. So please stick with me. This psalm is titled A Psalm of Asaph. The author Asaph was probably the great singer and musician of David and Solomon's era. And it says in 1st and 2nd Chronicles, they add that Asaph was a prophet in his musical compositions. Interesting. Some commentators connect this psalm with 2nd Chronicles 20, verses 1 through 37, and the victory won in Jehoshaphat's time. Others see the collection of 10 enemies set against Israel as not referring to one specific occasion, but to the constant danger of extermination Israel lived under, relevant in both the ancient and modern world. Wow. Again, please leave your comments below on the impressions that you're getting from this. I want to provide some bullet points to you, but I'm going to let you connect the dots. I mean, I have my own interpretation. It says, in the very beginning of this prayer, it's saying, do not keep silent, O God, do not keep silent. Your enemies are making a tumult. They're trying to cut us off as a people. So Asaph sang this prayer in a time of national crisis. The enemies had come against Israel, who were set on their national destruction. If God were to keep silent or hold his peace or be still on behalf of Israel, they would be destroyed. So Meyer, this is a quote, it says, it is so difficult sometimes to go on living day by day without one authoritative word. And this is exactly what my husband and I were praying for, like an authoritative word from God. And we are prone to rebuke God for his silence, that he is still and that he holds his peace. But God has not kept silent. His word was manifested. In him, the silence of eternity was broken. And that's exactly what I felt. He was actually showing me something with this blooming artichoke. Okay, so Asaph asked God to behold this crisis and to regard the enemies of Israel as his own enemies, as those who hated him, hated God. Asaph was confident that if God did this, he would act on behalf of Israel. They are not only enemies to us, thy people, but also to thy will and name and glory. So this gets really interesting right here. All right, talking about crafty counsel, okay? This was the crafty counsel of the nations united against Israel. This desire of a confederation of nations to destroy Israel did not end in the days of Asaph. His prayer could be sung today as neighboring nations and the whole world community. Okay, what does that remind you of? That reminds me of globalism. Threaten Israel. It's not just Israel, it's threatening all of God's people. I mean, the persecution is at the door. Adam Clarke paraphrased the words of verse 4, let us exterminate the whole race, that there may not be a record of them on the face of the earth. This is exactly what the Egyptians did. They would erase whole sections of their history if they were embarrassed by something. They would just take it all away. And we see that happening now. It's like modern day book burning. In all the annals of recorded history, there has never been a people so encircled by foes or as persecuted as the Jews have been. Yet, surprisingly, the Jews have prospered. In 1836, a world census indicated that there were then 3 million Jews living in many countries. A century later, in 1936, in spite of severe persecutions in which many Jews were killed, particularly in Russia, a second census indicated that the Jewish world population had risen to 16 million, an increase of 13 million in a century. The Nazis killed more than 6 million Jews, but today there are more Jews in the world than before the Nazi era. The only explanation for this growth is that the hand of God has been on this people and that he has blessed them. And I believe that that is what he is saying right now. Okay, the hand of God is on us, his sheltered ones. Israel has had its battles, ancient and modern. Christianity has also been opposed, and some have sought to completely cut Christians off. One example was the Roman Emperor Diocletian. Diocletian boasted that he had destroyed Christianity. He liked to think that he had defeated it. He ordered a medal to be made with the inscription, "The name of Christianity being extinguished." Diocletian also set up at least 2 monuments on the frontier of the empire with these inscriptions. And then it gives his long name with having extended the Roman Empire in the east and the west, and for having extinguished the name of Christians who brought the Republic to ruin, and then for having everywhere abolished the superstition of Christ, for having extended the worship of the gods. Diocletian is dead and gone, comparatively a footnote on the pages of history. The fame and glory of Jesus Christ is spread all over the earth. God still takes care of his sheltered ones. So, and there's a quote here from Charles Spurgeon about the sheltered ones. The 10 heathen nations conspired against Israel, but they could not really harm the chosen people, for God himself had hidden them as a hen hides her chickens under her wings when the kite hovers overhead, or as one who has found a treasure hides it away from the hands of the thief. So this reminds me in my husband's dream about being under the seat, hiding, being sheltered, and not even feeling the heat of the kite that flies overhead, or the bomb, the blast that had apparently happened in his dream. I mean, it could be just symbolic, or maybe it's something that may be coming down the road. We won't know, but we'll see. Asaph again emphasized that the enemies were not only against Israel, but against Yahweh, Israel's God. They formed a confederacy. Enemies often come together to attack God and his people. That very day, there's a scripture from Luke, that very day Pilate and Herod became friends with each other, for previously they had been at enmity with each other. Luke 23:12. So the true antagonists are not Israel and the world, but God and the world. That's from McLaren. And then Spurgeon says, what a motley group they were. A league against Israel is always attractive and gathers whole nations within its bonds. All right, so it talks about all of the people groups, these other nations, the 10, calling them heathen nations that came against Israel. So you can get more into that if you go to enduringworld.com, the Bible commentary for Psalm 83. For our purposes today, I'm going to jump into the next part of the prayer where it starts into the cry for vengeance. God's people just begging him to grant victory and deliverance as in the days of the judges. Okay? So it says God's victory over Midian through Gideon is described in Judges 6, 7, and 8. So I want to say something here. The Bible is replete with instances and stories and testimonies of God using either one person or a small group of people for his purposes. And he doesn't choose perfect people. He chooses people who are willing to be vessels for the Lord. And so I think, that was the very last video that I did, and I called it What the Enemy Underestimates. And I have had this growing sense in my spirit that what the enemy means for our destruction is going to turn on them, on the enemy. And there are a lot, one of the best examples of that is in Esther with Haman and Mordecai, and you guys probably know the story, but if not, there is if you want, like movies, there's a great movie, I believe it's on, what's that, PureFlix. You can go and watch the Esther movie. It's really good, and you'll see what I mean. Or you can just read the book of Esther. Okay, so Charles Spurgeon says, faith delights to light upon precedents and quote them before the Lord. In the present instance, Asaph found a very appropriate one, for the nations in both cases were very much the same, and the plight of the Israelites very similar. God's victory over the Canaanite king and his general through Deborah and Barak is described in Judges 4. So it talks about perishing and who became refuse on the earth. John Trapp noted that this means they lay unburied, rotted above the ground. This added to the defeat and disgrace of Israel's enemies. Okay, that's really interesting. So, and then it's talking about their nobles, like their princes, their the kings, the rulers of the nations. It says, smite the great ones as well as the common ruck. Suffer not the ringleaders to escape. As Oreb fell at the rock and Zeb at the winepress, so do thou mete out vengeance to Zion's foes, wherever thou mayest overtake them. And that's another quote from Spurgeon. Okay. Let's see. Let us take for ourselves the pastures of God for a possession. This is probably one of the most arrogant things that an enemy of the Lord can do. And I think this is just that breaking point where oftentimes the Lord says enough is enough. It says here, Israel faced threats to her existence in the days of the judges, and God delivered her. Asaph's prayer reminded Israel of God's previous rescue, using it as a reason to trust him in the present crisis. So I think that is probably the meat and potatoes of this message here. We're going to have to put our full trust, not in man, not in medicine, not in anything, but the Lord in our present crisis, because that is really, he is our deliverer. The phrase, the pastures of God, reminds us again of what high regard God has for the land of Israel. He regards it as his pastures. So the enemy's thoughts are rephrased in the prayer to bring out the truth about the territories they had coveted. These were the pastures of God, not simply the holdings of Israel. The Midianites had despoiled the land of the crops and had caused great fear among the Israelites. We see that right now. God's people are afraid. I've been guilty of it too. God's been working and dealing with me on this fear and the anxiety. This spoiling of Israel's crops is probably referred to in the bold claim, let us take possession of the pasture lands of God. Okay, so we're like God's harvest. So think of it like that. All right, and then it's talking about bringing these enemies to destruction, okay, right here. Asaph prayed that God would take these many enemies. It's like we have so many things coming at us, I just can't even begin to list them. Okay, many enemies determined to destroy Israel and scatter them like chaff before the wind and the whirling dust. He prayed they would be consumed like fire burns in the woods. Now, what did I just tell you about my husband's dream? It was like fire burning in the woods, okay? But yet he felt safe. He felt safe. He wasn't scared. The word rendered whirling dust in Psalm 83:13, now this is the one that my friend sent me, is somewhat doubtful. It literally means a rolling thing, but what particular thing of the sort is difficult to determine. So this is the connection with the artichoke coming up. It could be tumbleweed or wheel. It's a plant of the wild artichoke family, okay? A plant with wheel-shaped stems and thistles. To the ancient Hebrew, there was nothing more powerful than the tempest or the storm. The psalmist prayed that God would not only defeat Israel's enemies, but also pursue and frighten them with his great power, okay? And the interesting thing, and this is the twist of it all, okay? Bring the enemies to the knowledge of the true God. We saw this, another example of this in the Bible is with, trying to remember the name of that king, Nebuchadnezzar, where he spent all the years, I believe it was like 7 years in the wilderness as a beast until God literally had him walking around on his hands and knees in the dirt until he would look up and submit to the Lord, that only the Lord is high. So Asaph ended the psalm with an unexpected turn. After praying for the destruction of Israel's enemies, he prayed that they would be thoroughly humbled. He said, fill their faces with shame so they would be led to seek Yahweh. And I would definitely pray in agreement with that. Asaph understood that we often forget people will only seek the Lord if they are first laid low before his power. There is a sense in which God must defeat us before he will save us. But there is a deeper desire in the psalmist's heart than the enemy's destruction. He wishes that they should be turned into God's friends, and he wishes for their chastisement as a means to that end. Okay? Shame has often weaned men from their idols and set them on seeking the Lord. Charles Spurgeon. The punishments inflicted by heaven upon wicked men are primarily intended to humble and convert them. How many of us are still praying for the conversion of people around us that are just completely, oblivious to the things that are important to God, So the great humbling would lead to their surrender and submission to the God who is most high over all the earth. This psalm began with a plea that God would not remain silent and ends with the idea of his fame and glory going out to all the earth. When the silences of God are broken by his noises, men learn that the God of grace is the most high over all the earth. And I'm going to be so bold as to say that those are the times that we are living in. And this is what we need to be praying. I think that this blooming artichoke is a sign that the silences of God are being broken and that he is going to humble even people who think that they are the most high. And that would be a message of hope. And in that, there's an interesting twist of this artichoke. If you go down here, and this is just a secular website, the artichoke, let me zoom in on this. Can you see? Oops, it's not working. It says they represent hope, peace, and prosperity. So it may not be the peace we think. It may be peace in the storm for now. We know what our hope is. Our hope is in the salvation of Jesus Christ and what he did for us on the cross, and knowing that what he promised in our eventual salvation and our resurrection, and that is yet future, that full circle. We know we have that hope. But also prosperity. It may not be in the way we think, but we'll just have to wait and see. But I think God is going to increase his people. And it could just be like words of wisdom, like this morning. I believe that this is from the Lord. I just don't even have any question at this point, just the way that it all came together. I love when God moves like this. It's really quite amazing. We had completely different plans today to go travel 2 hours out of town and go do something. And the Lord kind of put a stop, and I think he wants us doing what we're doing right now. And there's some other fun things we're going to do a little bit later, but I think we're living in really interesting times that even small decisions need to be brought before the Lord, and we need to be walking in the Spirit very close to him and trusting him in everything. I know how hard that is right now. Believe me, I struggle with it too. So I do believe this is a very timely message. Please leave your comments below if you have any further interpretation or input, or just your reaction or feedback. I would love to hear what you all have to say. I so respect this community, and I hope that this has been comforting to you as it has been to me. My husband and I were just about nearly in tears reading all of this, because he even pointed out that when he was underneath that seat, like hiding, he was sheltered. And all of these things that I'm reading in this whole like breadcrumb trail that God has laid out, it really just is full circle. It's really amazing. So I'm going to do a quick prayer, and then I'm going to let you go so you can leave a comment below. Please leave a comment this time. I think this is probably one of my most important messages. So Dear Jesus, thank you for this connection that we have with you, this relationship. And I would just beg and pray that you would bestow mercy on us and shelter and bring your hope and your peace upon us and your prosperity, the way that you would define those terms, that you would just throw that umbrella over our lives in those ways, and that you would show us step by step and day by day the decisions that we need to make, and make them loud and clear to us, and help us to hear you, and help us to stop and pray. And it's just the fervent prayers of your saints that you are going to honor and respond to. And I just thank you for everything that you're doing now, that you're moving in the land, and that you are going to heal us and deliver us, and that there are going to be some amazing, amazing times ahead. These are amazing times we're living in now. And help deliver us from the fear of the fowler, the snare, because I do believe that this is a message that the snare that the enemy sets is going to be the snare that he falls into himself. I believe with all my heart that you are confirming those feelings that I've been having, that the enemy completely underestimates us, and only because of your power working through us. So I just praise you and give you all the glory for that, and thank you for these channels to communicate with this beloved group of people. Before this video, I had talked to a beloved sister in the UK who also feels very alone, and I can tell that some of the feelings that were just oozing off the page at me are the same things I've been feeling. So I just say that you cover her with your comfort, and everyone listening, and just thank you. Thank you for bringing us together, because she said that too. She's really thankful that we at least have had this to come together with like-minded people. So in Jesus' name I pray and thank you. Amen and Maranatha. Thank you for listening today, and I'll be back soon. Bye.